can do that by making contact with the Family Arts Campaign team. So just also to explain the links between the Family Arts Campaign and the Celebrating Age programme, for those of you who are not aware of that before. I know some of you will have heard this many times before, but we must have a bunch of new people in the room. So just to explain that the Celebrating Age programme is a funding programme which has been jointly funded by the Arts Council England and the Baring Foundation. It started back in 2017 and finishes next year. Though projects, as my colleague will explain in a bit, kind of are quite staggered over that period. There's been 33 projects in total. And those projects are all doing a myriad of different things, but all working in different ways to engage older people as participants, as artists, as curators in a range of different art forms right up and down the country. So I lead the National Evaluation team for Celebrating Age. My colleague Lorna works with me on that as well, and I'm going to introduce you to her in a few minutes. And we are kind of providing evaluative support across that whole programme. And as a result, we've been working in partnership with Family Arts Campaign to put on these kind of biannual age-focused, Celebrating Age-focused webinars. And actually, I was just remembering earlier that, you know, Family Arts Campaign is ahead of the curve here, because this is actually the second biannual webinar that we've run as a webinar format rather than a live face-to-face event. We ran one back in February when we could still have all met together, but decided in a very modern way not to. And thought a bit about dementia-friendly communities and what sort of dementia access looks like within the arts and cultural sector. Since then, as the world has become more and more webinarised, if that's even a word, Family Arts Campaign have been running a whole series of webinars themed around COVID, looking at different sort of aspects and different age groups. Just to give you a flavour, all of these are available for free, downloadable via the FAC website. They did one on creating accessible digital content for children and families with additional needs. They did one on support for developing and delivering creative packs and resources for vulnerable families, and a session on how family attitudes and behaviours have changed during COVID. So there's a whole rake of materials out there for those who are working across the age groups.
Oh, hang on, back now.
Oh, hello. This webinar then, just to explain the focus today, is very much about thinking about how arts and cultural organisations working with older people have managed to adapt their offer and their engagement during COVID-19. So we are focusing on older people in this session. And just to sort of run through the programme, which hopefully most of you will have had sight of. In a moment, after this introduction, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lorna, who's going to share some reflections from the Celebrating Age programme in relation to how projects adapted. And then we're going to hear from a series of kind of case studies. We've got Artspace Cinderford talking a bit about their work in care homes. We'll take a short comfort break, as Abby mentioned, at around about 11:15, just for 5 minutes. Farrell Renowden is going to then present a case study about the Age of Creativity and Age UK Oxfordshire's work around exploring digital opportunities. And we're then going to come to Hayley at Writing East Midlands, who's going to talk a little bit about how they've been engaging older people during this period. We'll then have hopefully retain a nice half-an-hour chunk for some Q&A and some discussions. As Abby mentioned, I'll be keeping my eye on that chat box, looking out for your questions, your comments. If you want to make a kind of more, I suppose if you want to kind of share more detailed examples of your own practice, probably best to do that on Twitter. And the hashtag is at Family Arts handle is all there on that slide. You'll see it there, at Family Arts 1, hashtag Family Arts, also hashtag Age Friendly in use. So do use any of those to keep the conversation going. We're sure there's a whole wealth of information and ideas out in the audience. Unfortunately, we can't feature all of it today, but we'll squeeze in as many comments and questions as we possibly can. So yeah, we're going to try and keep people as much to time as we can, and I'll be sort of keeping an eye on timings, doing a little bit of nudging, maybe nudging people through chat boxes, And just at the very end of the session, we're going to be hearing from Virginia Tandy of the Creative Ageing Development Agency, just getting an update from her. So that's the lineup. We should crack on without further ado. I think I've said everything I should, but I'll trust Anna Diva to jump in and remind me if I haven't. And assuming she doesn't, we will hand straight over to my colleague Lorna. Lorna Easterbrook, as I mentioned, has been working with me throughout the whole evaluation of the Celebrating Age programme. And Lorna wrote a short kind of summary of some of the kind of learning that we were starting to glean from Celebrating Age projects back in June, which I understand the Arts Council England are happy for us to kind of circulate, hopefully after this event, and they're going to publish it soon, so we'll make sure everyone's shared into that. But I just thought it was a really good start to today to ask Lorna to come and share some of the reflections that came out of her pulling together of all the kind of early learning and adaptation that was coming out at that stage. So without further ado, I'll shut up and hand you over to Lorna.
Thanks very much, Imogen, and hello everybody as well from me. And I'm one third of the evaluation team. Imogen, myself, and Mark Robinson from Thinking Practice, as some of you will know. Now, I'm just going to start off with a little bit of kind of background, really, kind of a little bit of introduction to the whole Celebrating Age programme, partly for those of you who are new to it, partly as a recap and reminder to those of us who've been involved in kind of various ways. As Imogen said, there were 2 rounds of funding, one from 2017 and one from 2018. Programme of work for organisations to work with older participants funded by Arts Council England and Baring Foundation. And we've kind of just done some really sort of quick graphs. We've put some dates in, which are the dates of the grant itself. Obviously, some projects were a little bit slower getting started because we need to get staff into place, and then that's been added on to the end of the funded process as well. And we have one little anomaly, which is City Arts, who were originally in the first round and hit a whole host of issues and needed to move into round 2. So we have slightly more projects in round 2 than in round 1. But you also begin to get a sense here are all the projects, and you begin to get a sense of A, the range of projects, B, the kind of geographical spread, hopefully, and also some sense of the start and end dates, which, as Imogen's already said, is incredibly varied across all the projects involved. And of course, there are projects still ongoing. So just sort of very quickly, these are the projects that actually ended by the end of last year. And again, quite a range. So some projects only had perhaps 10 months funding. Some projects had up to 3 years funding. So a real range of what people were doing and a real range of how long they actually had money to do that. So we ended up with quite a lot of projects who were still running this year, some of them coming to a conclusion by the end of March with final projects and final reports, and then continuing with their work, but through other funding programs, and then a number of projects that are continuing. We have 4 that have kind of been ending over the autumn and into the winter, and then we have 8 projects that will still continue into next year. So one of the things, just from a program-wide point of view and from the evaluation side of things, one of the sort of the small impacts of COVID is that our own final report will be later next year. We'd originally intended with projects ending by the end of March that we would do our final report sort of late spring, early summer and have that ready for the summer. And we've been asked to push that back towards the end of 2021. So just as a little update to everybody. Now, part of our evaluation, because we have so many projects beginning and ending with so many different dates, part of what we've been doing in terms of the programme evaluation is having a period of time when we catch up with projects. Sometimes that's projects who've finished in the last perhaps 6 months. Sometimes it's projects that are still ongoing, still continuing. And we're, having conversations with projects to say, how are you getting on? What have you learned? What's changed? Asking people about their experiences using most significant change, which is our qualitative evaluation approach across the whole programme. And we were planning to do this as normal this year, around about March to May. We were going to get in touch with projects and do that. And of course, with the hit of COVID, our initial contact and conversation with projects was very much, how are you? How are things going? what are you finding? What are you doing? Can we kind of have a bit of a conversation about what's going on immediately in terms of the impact of COVID? So these are the organisations that we spoke with. These are the projects that we spoke with, or we had other contact with. So some projects we couldn't speak to anybody. In one case, all the staff were furloughed instantly. And where we couldn't speak with projects for a whole host of logistical reasons, we looked online to see what projects were putting on their websites. Some projects emailed us things, and we had a bit of an ongoing conversation with quite a number of these projects as well, where we started off saying, what are you doing? You know, kind of where are you at? How are you all as well, apart from anything else? And then we would have some follow-up information from people saying, well, we tried this and that's going really well, or we thought we'd do this and actually we've changed our minds. So there were quite a lot of ongoing conversations over those couple of months. What we found is that there were some really common, sorry, I've just temporarily lost my mouse control. There we are. Okay, so we found some really obvious common areas of focus. What were projects looking at? They were thinking about staff. They were thinking about their freelancers and artists who they were working with. And one of the things that actually helped in that regard was Arts Council said, you know, keep paying everyone. The people you're working with, keep paying. And that created some flexibility, certainly for some of the projects, about, okay, we've still got people, about what can we do? You know, how can we perhaps use people a little bit differently? There was also a really strong, obvious focus on older participants, older practitioners, and also because projects are all working with partners. So there were a whole host of things going on with partner organisations and with wider venues. A lot of projects are running things in community-based venues, which were all also having to think about closing and about furloughing staff and so on and so forth. So there were four main responses the projects were really also looking at. The top one really for all projects that we were in contact with was just keeping in touch with the older participants who were already involved, whether that was in groups, whether that was singly, however that was, and also supporting participants to keep in touch with each other, particularly where there was group work going on and perhaps people weren't living in the same setting, so they were living, you know, scattered as normal amongst a community, not living in, say, a sheltered housing unit, for example. A lot of focus as well, again, very obviously on continuing the existing projects and adapting where this was possible, kind of thinking about, okay, we're supposed to be doing craft work, what can we do? How can we do that differently? Or we were going to do a performance, how can we do that differently? And then particularly thinking about new projects, bringing in new people and thinking ahead for next year as well. So a massive range of things and really, really rapid responses that people were coming up with. And we're very grateful to all the projects that we spoke with. I mean, we always are, but we really particularly appreciated taking that time and actually just being able to say, look, this is where we're at. And this is what we think is going to be coming next. We found what projects were actually doing, we divided them into a sort of a set of responses, really. And this one we've called digital, old and new. And so by old digital, what we mean is the digital approaches that people were already using. So older participants were already on email with projects, or they were texting or making videos. They had Facebook pages. They had WhatsApp groups. So those continued. So, for example, Gateshead Council Libraries continued emailing materials to the people they were emailing them to anyway. But they also added on for the people who weren't on email, and they did things like posting things and things. So there was kind of quite a mix and match, but they were using what was already being used. And then there was the new digital. So this was new perhaps to participants, to artists, to the project, to the organisation. So things like Zoom, of course, Signal, YouTube, podcasts, a whole range of kind of new ways of using digital that hadn't been used previously by those projects. And here's just one example that's going out later this month. Anybody who's interested, New Writing South, they'd planned to put on theatre performances, live theatre performances of people's stories, and those instead will be online in a variety of different ways and other events as well. So we thought we'd put that link on for anybody who'd like to take part and be involved in that. Then there were the non-digital responses, And these were really varied. I mean, there were all the things that you might expect, that post, obviously, deliveries by hand, particularly where people were living in communal settings, so care homes, sheltered housing, and you could deliver, a big box of something or other so people could physically make things, for example. Lots of phone calls, radio, print, other materials. So just one example, Max Culture Club, their participants were, their members were going to be choosing photographs to put on an exhibition. And so what MAC did was posted the photographs, posted prints of the pictures out to participants so that in the privacy of their own, the enforced privacy of their own kitchen, they could put it out on the kitchen table or wherever they had space, and they could physically see not just the photographs, but also how they might fit together, so that when they were having their conversation, they had actually, they had got something that was much more tactile and visual, and they could move things around literally in real time. And I'm just going to pass back to Imogen for a couple of the other things that we uncovered that people shared with us, and also some other work that's been done around COVID responses.
Thanks so much, Lorna. That was really helpful. Yeah, just to say that there were also some other types of examples. There was some really kind of creative outreach. Arts Alive, for example, with their partner Flicks in the Sticks, put on some live concerts at the ends of driveways. So a real sense of kind of, taking art literally out to people where they could meet and where they could look out of windows and stand in doorways. And a really nice example from Moving Memory that I guess just reminds us that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a huge amount of material already out there online that can be accessed. The dancers from the Moving Memory dance group accessed other organisations' classes online. So they found some really great material from the Company of Elders at Sadler's Wells Theatre, and they use those existing materials that are out there. So I think that's been a really interesting kind of reflection, that we don't need to feel as though we've got to generate all our own material. Often it's kind of finding other good material and connecting people to it, and maybe using that as a group in various ways. I just wanted, before we move on, to hear from some of the individual projects that have been part of the Celebrating Age programme, to share with you as well the new Bearing Foundation report that came out. I believe it was launched at an event just yesterday, which I wasn't actually able to make it to. And just to explain a little bit about that report, it's called Key Workers, Creative Ageing in Lockdown and After, and it was written and pulled together by David Cutler, who heads up the Bearing Foundation. And it's a really interesting kind of drawing together of a whole wealth of different case studies and examples and stories. They've also undertaken some survey work. There was a survey of 62 organisations done, so there's a bit of kind of some quantitative information there, just to get a kind of sense of the scale of the shift, really, from digital, from face-to-face only to digital and remote methods of working. And I guess some real positives in there. I was particularly struck that just over half of respondents to that survey said they'd actually managed to maintain or even increase the number of participants that were engaged, which is incredible, really. And almost all reported really positive experience for participants, and a whole load of kind of new learning and experimentation for artists, which really had to happen in a hugely accelerated way. But the report also kind of warns about the context in which 90% of these organisations were worried about their organisation's financial viability. And almost all of those responding were also worried about the health and well-being both of artists and of participants during lockdown. So just some kind of reminders there that although there are, of course, some huge silver linings in all of this, and our kind of focus today will be very much to reflect on those silver linings, there are also some very genuine concerns. And the report also kind of flags up kind of, I suppose, the sheer scale of some of those inequalities and the digital divide, and how we can try to sort of make sure that we include everybody, from here on in accessing to a range of different means. I was particularly struck by some of the kind of reflections around just how hard it can be to engage people with quite advanced dementia. through digital means. There's some lovely reflections in there from Nikki Taylor at the Leeds Playhouse around how much you kind of miss that kind of physical presence, that ability to be tactile, to draw on a full range of senses when you're trying to do things remotely by definition. So there are sort of challenges there, but also tons and tons of examples of the kind of innovative ways in which organisations have adapted their offer and evidence and testament of that enormous overnight learning that's gone on across the whole sector to a shift where hardly anyone was doing anything solely digital and remotely. There might have been elements of it to a point where virtually everybody is now. So that's the very subject on which we'll be reflecting now over the rest of the session, of course. And we thought it would be really useful to start by thinking a bit about care homes. I remember some of those early conversations I had with celebrating age projects that were working in care homes. Back in sort of May, certainly it felt almost, April, May, it felt almost impossible that we were ever going to be able to do any creative work with care homes ever again. I mean, it was already quite a challenging sector to kind of engage and get into care homes, but it just felt as though no one was ever going to be able to set foot in a care home again, and how were we going to get over that? So we thought we'd start by bringing to the stage, so to speak, Hannah Elton-Wall, who works at Artspace, Cinderford. They've been doing a whole load of work, not just about care homes. I know she's going to talk more widely about some of their other creative projects, but we also thought it would be really interesting to hear from them as a project who has managed to kind of find and adapt their ways of working to engage care home residents and care home staff. So without further ado, Hannah, I hope you're there.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Brilliant. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so I just need to find my slide. There you go. I'm also going to start my stopwatch so that I waffle on for too long. So I've actually turned my video off. I'm based in the Forest of Dean, and our Wi-Fi, our broadband is pretty terrible. So I will start by just saying a huge thank you to Imogen. We're really pleased to be part of this, and thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about one of our projects, Mindscape, and then tell you about how we've adapted our provision during lockdown and what we've learned really from this new way of working. Artspace are based in the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire. We're an Arts Council NPO, and we provide creative opportunities for people of any age or ability. We specialise in provision that's fully inclusive and work with people with and without disabilities. Around half the participants that we work with have a learning disability or a physical disability or a long-term illness. So projects that I'm going to talk to you about today is actually a partnership initiative with the Wye Valley Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, the Forestry Commission and the Forestry District Council. The project's designed to enable people with dementia and their carers to connect to nature through art. Usually pre-COVID, the project comprises of weekly community workshops led by artists and volunteers, and we run the project in various locations in the Forest of Dean and Wye Valley. But the workshops are very much inspired by nature, and usually around about 20 participants join in each time. And because we run the project year-round, sometimes we do have to run those workshops indoors if the weather is poor. We often take the project into care homes, and the aim of that work is to support care homes to actually make the most of the natural resources that they already have available to them. So most care homes have amazing gardens which are often very underutilised. So we provide artist-led programmes and activities for the residents, but we work with an emphasis on enabling activity coordinators to deliver their own Mindscape-type activities independently. Each year we also produce a resource booklet which includes 10 nature-based activities and step-by-step instructions. And we also provide some professional development workshops for NHS dementia education teams. And basically, we want to promote the stress relieving benefits of access to nature and different approaches to using nature as a tool for reminiscence and sensory work for people with dementia. So just to move on then and tell you a little bit about how we started to adapt our model. At the very start of lockdown, mid-March, like many organisations, I think we were just in absolute panic mode. And we really didn't know how on earth we'd be able to deliver any of our provision or how we could actually survive as an organisation. We were also really concerned about our Mindscape participants and the impact that lockdown might have on their well-being. Many of our participants who are living in the community are quite vulnerable health-wise and were cut off from all of their usual support networks, their family and their friends and the other organisations that they link into. So we knew that we really wanted to find a way of engaging with them as quickly as possible, but we weren't quite sure how. We were also really mindful that everybody, our staff included, and the artists that we work with, were all feeling really overwhelmed by the situation. So we went in very low-key with a good old-fashioned phone call, and we simply rung participants every week at the same time that we would have had our Mindscape sessions. So we gave them a call on a Tuesday morning and just checked in really to see how they were. And then one of our artists, Cherry, who works on the Mindscape programme, came up with a really simple idea of posting the participants some runner bean seeds. We wanted really to kind of get involved in a collective activity that was very low key. And meanwhile, Cherry was setting up a Facebook page, and we were encouraging participants to plant their runner bean seeds. And we started off a bit of a runner bean growing competition. Quite a few of the participants were quite keen on Facebook. Some of them were using Facebook already, some weren't. But we set up a private Facebook group, and before we knew it, we had 20-odd carers madly posting pictures of their runner bean plants, measuring them. We were logging the length of their runner bean fruits, and essentially people were getting onto Facebook, and we were getting that sense of community going. People also started posting pictures of other things like their gardens and walks that they've been on, their pets. As interest in a Facebook page grew, we started some very simple video tutorials onto Facebook. We were using largely activities where we knew that participants would have the materials available to them at home. So, for example, we had a go at some origami. And we did some printmaking using natural materials that people had found in their gardens. And as people started to have a little go at the activity, they were posting photos of their artwork online and then commenting on each other's work. We got to stage there when we were using Zoom quite frequently. And you know, as organisations and partners, and felt that it would be wonderful to see if we could get our participants using Zoom. So in the first instance, we just set up a drop-in social, and we literally just had a cup of tea and a chat. It was really informal and relaxed, and we were just talking really about what we'd been up to during lockdown and just asking people how they were doing. And that led to conversations then about doing the Zoom creative workshops. Now we've actually got an artist-led program, and every other week we run a Zoom workshop. We did enough resources similarly until the end of lockdown and until we can work together face-to-face again. So we trialled all this work, and we were really keen that we also get this model into homes. We had contacted care at the very start of lockdown, and you know, I think really everybody was in such a panic, And I think the question that we were asking initially was, how can we get care homes to want to work with us so that we don't lose our funding? But as the situation with the virus progressed, and we were, of course, made aware by the media of how tough things were in care homes, we reframed that question. And I think we started to then ask, how can we actually help care homes out during this really difficult time? We knew that they didn't have much capacity. They said they didn't have many resources and they weren't using Zoom. Many of them simply didn't have the tech in place to be able to connect with us. But we also knew through years of working in partnership with care homes that their priorities are the well-being of their residents. And we could only assume that activity coordinators during this time would be even more pressure than they usually are, especially in light of the fact that residents were cut off from having visitors. So the importance of meaningful interaction with residents during this time was no doubt of even more importance to them. We also know that care homes keep records and report to the Care Quality Commission on the kind of activities that they provide. So we knew that we'd be able to help them and tick some of their own boxes, which we felt was a really important thing that we wanted to help them to do. Secondly, they were telling us that families of residents were getting in touch with the care homes and actually asking if they could contact their relatives through Zoom. So like many of us, care homes were being forced into embracing technology, and some of the care homes we'd spoken to were already in the process of purchasing tablets so that family members could connect to their relatives. And we also fired off and we had a couple of £1,000 from the district council that enabled us to purchase a load more tablet computers. So we knew that if technology was an issue for them, we could also just provide a tablet as well to help them out. Finally, we're always really aware from our conversations with care homes and activity coordinators that they're often expected to be a jack of all trades and deliver all sorts of different activities with extremely limited budgets and extremely limited resources. And we've worked with them in the past, and they've told they've really loved that opportunity to work with artists because, whilst activity coordinators are creative people, they can sometimes feel like they're running out of ideas. So we knew that in a nutshell, we could provide them with an opportunity to work with an artist and give them an appealing package that would make their lives easier. We'd provide them with the materials, the resources, the equipment if necessary, and the support from an experienced artist. So what we're offering care homes at the moment then, this is just the shape of the programme that suits us. We are delivering activities in 6-week blocks, and we provide a full kit of materials up front. And in that kit of materials, we provide hard copy, step-by-step instructions on how to deliver that activity. Then each week, the artist connects to the care home over Zoom, and the idea of the Zoom workshop is that the artist inspires and motivates the care homes, and they might do a demo of an activity. They might do something that they've made earlier in a sort of Blue Peter style. They might even show links to the work of other artists for inspiration. They can also answer any questions and give feedback and support. But the idea then is that the care home has got the materials, the knowledge and the support they need to carry out these activities with their residents. And we follow up the Zoom call with a support phone call a few days later, just to check that everyone's getting on okay and just to troubleshoot any problems. For those that use social media, we also set up a private Facebook page, and some of the care home activity coordinators like to share pictures of what residents have been up to on the Facebook page, and sometimes actually connect families in with that Facebook page, so families can see what the people, what their family members are up to, basically. we were asked then to share with you what our main sort of points of learning have been throughout this process. And I mean, there have been many. I can't sort of underestimate what a steep learning curve it's been for us. We're still learning. But some of the key things that I really wanted to share was one size definitely doesn't fit all. So we've worked with 9 care homes over the last couple of months, and no 2 care homes have been the same. They've all got different policies and procedures with regard to whether they use Zoom or Facebook. And of course, all their residents will have varying levels of need. Some care homes work with people with more advanced dementia, for example. So flexibility is key. Some care homes have welcomed the idea of trying to connect the artist directly with residents using a large screen. Others have preferred that the artists work directly with the activity coordinator one-to-one, so that the activity coordinator can then roll out activities to residents afterwards. Keeping it simple is a big one. I think care homes have got enough on their plates at the moment, and they don't need anything too complicated. And again, this is where nature really helped. I'm sure that many of us would agree that nature was a source of solace for many of us during lockdown. So we programmed activities that made the most of what care homes had available, not least the fact that most of them had lovely gardens that they could go to for inspiration and materials. And then finally, just to touch on what we're going to do with this work, how we're going to carry it forward. Obviously, it goes without saying that we really hope that we can return to face-to-face workshops as soon as possible. That's our bread and butter, and it's what we do best. We also know that this means of delivery doesn't suit everyone. Technology is still a huge barrier for a lot of people. But these sessions have enabled us to keep engaging with our partners and our participants during this difficult time. So we ran 16 courses and enrolled 160 participants in this way, and feedback was positive. And we've also reached out to brand new audiences who haven't ever come to Artspace before for all sorts of reasons, largely people who might have disabilities like, Emmy. We spoke to a lady who's had Emmy, and she was very keen to come to Artspace but had never been able to. So we've actually reached new audiences, and I think that it's a really useful string to our bow. We're definitely going to try and keep an element of online provision going forward. But we will keep refining things. We're going to invest in more equipment. We've had some real successes where care homes have overhead projectors and speakers so that they can amplify the sound for residents. We've also experienced challenges where artists have struggled to hear residents, so we're going to invest in some tabletop microphones. But we're going to keep refining what we do, and we're going to keep developing our step-by-step guides and YouTube tutorials. These are available to download on our website, and we're really happy to share anything that we've developed with other organisations and individuals. So I hope that's given you a brief idea of who we are and how we've adapted our provision. And yeah, we'd welcome any feedback on resources. It's all very much a work in progress. So yeah, that's us. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hannah, for that. That was a really good overview of your work. Lots of lovely practical examples. I remember when we spoke back earlier in the year, I was really struck by the runner bean growing competition. A really nice example of kind of blending digital and non-digital, and great to see about those resources that you've got that others can access. We're going to take, we're running a few minutes early actually, which is great. We'll have a bit more time for questions, but I think we'll go now into our comfort break as planned. We're just going to take a quick 5 minutes, and then when we come back, we're going to hear from Farrell at Age UK Oxfordshire. So just 5 minutes if people want to mute. If you don't need a comfort break, do use the chance to start typing some questions or some topics that you'd like us to discuss later into the box. And we'll regroup again at 10:48. Okay?
Oh, I can do that. Yeah, I don't know.
Just to remind everybody to put themselves on mute if you're not already during this period, because otherwise, obviously, we can't We can hear you.
Cultural partnerships at Age UK Oxfordshire. I work on a national project to embed creativity and culture across local Age UKs across England. I also manage the Age of Creativity network, which is a network of about 2,000 more professionals who work on the theme of creative ageing from all different sectors and backgrounds. And the aspect of my work that I'm going to talk about today is the Age of Creativity Festival. So again, for those of you who don't know about it, in normal times, we normally run every May, from the 1st to the 31st of May, and we celebrate creativity for, with and by older people across England. So today I just want to talk about the before COVID, what we were planning, the during COVID, the sort of nightmare emergency response that we were all experiencing, and then a few thoughts about our future plans for the coming year. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to talk, really. From talking to other professionals who've been going through this, it's been really valuable just to kind of share, to learn from each other, to feel as though none of us have been getting it right and that we can share the ups and the downs with each other. So I am going to talk about some of the things in quite an honest way about how we adapted quickly, we didn't always get it right, and how we plan to grow and learn from that experience. So for the Age of Creativity Festival, in January we were planning an amazing festival on the theme of reaching out. Our focus was around disability, LGBTQ+, and the BAME community, and we were working with Voluntary Arts, the Culture, Health and Wellbeing Alliance and London Arts and Health Forum. Some of you might have taken part in some of our events in January, which were a kind of a collaborative launch of our collective festivals that were all running during May. And then, of course, COVID came along to scupper all of our plans. We were planning a kind of a huge eclectic mix of really community-based level activity all the way up to some really exciting, challenging national events. But of course, in March time, we sort of found out that we weren't going to be going ahead with our plans as we hoped to. We were, I think, perhaps one of the first organisations to really rethink the way that we were working quite dramatically. I can remember right at the beginning, a lot of other organisations saying, hold on, you don't need to cancel everything quite so quickly, but we felt as though we could see the tidal wave coming and we wanted to respond as quickly as possible. So what we did, we did a call out to find out what was going online, what digital stuff were we already playing with, what people already got planned that we might be able to put into a programme so that people still had something to do. At that point, we were expecting about 50, 60 events, and we were absolutely overwhelmed. We had about 500 more events that were put forward for things as people went immediately to putting everything online. So we felt as though rather than adding to that mix of wonderful stuff, we should be promoting what other people were doing, and we should be curating that for older people. It was quite obvious to us that older people were struggling how to engage with some of our material, this sort of huge wealth of digital stuff, but people felt that they didn't quite know where to start. They didn't know which activities were safe, things that they were dubious about, confidence to go online. So our first response that we had in terms of supporting older people was to begin this curatorial process of selecting a small number of activities. We were actually doing this 3 times a week to begin with, and really making them accessible so that people felt that with the Age UK brand, with a well-known email address, that they could really rely on what we were giving them. In fact, that email that we sent out to lots of older people across the country with this curated amount of information was our most opened email by older people of all time. We had an open click rate of something like 95%, something like that. We also had lots of professionals who got in touch to say that we were providing them with the information that they really needed, because they felt overwhelmed and bombarded by the sheer volume of stuff that was coming out, and they didn't know where to start. So that was a really important thing that we did, that we sort of stumbled upon and really worked for us. And in fact, we are actually going to be developing that further over the next sort of year or so, as part of the festival, but just also part of our general work. So what we also did in May as part of the festival was we did a creative ageing snapshot. Really felt as though we didn't quite know where the sector was. We were just talking to our friends and colleagues, all sort of headless chicken mode, trying to make something work. And we felt as though it was an important time to really capture the feel of the sector and how people were responding individually and collectively. Again, we didn't know what we'd get back, but we were again overwhelmed with people responding to our call out. Just very quickly, I know I'm aware of time, but we did 4 different call outs. So we did one to the cultural sector to find out how people were adapting and changing. We did one to the age sector. We also did a call out for those who are working with people living with dementia and their carers. And we then also looked at people who were trying to deliver within that non-digital space, with people who were quite clearly not online and were not able to get online, which is quite a significant proportion of people, as we all know. And what we found from the cultural sector was a real sense of needing to connect with each other, that networking on a professional level was even more important than it had ever been before. Working out how we were going to do things, sharing resources, picking up ideas, that became crucial, particularly as a lot of people were furloughed and feeling quite disconnected from the world. So we felt as though there was a role to play there, and still is. Within the age sector, interestingly, people had felt as though creativity or culture was almost an add-on. When they weren't doing the day job, it was something interesting to look at. However, when we asked the age sector how they felt about creativity during lockdown, the overwhelming response was, it is part of our emergency response. Next, along to food parcels, we're delivering creative packs. And they really wanted that support to find the practical information and tools to get out to the people that they were working with. There's a sense of urgency. So again, that was something we helped with at the time with our own delivery, but something that we are continuing to do now and will do in the future. For those living with dementia and their carers, just obviously, we've spoken about this already, but all the existing issues just completely exacerbated and really challenging with some of the technology. So that isn't something that I've been able to, I'll be honest, come up with a really simple solution for. So if anybody's got any ideas, I'd love to share that. But something that people are still grappling with, and something that we are acutely aware of, that we need to be refining our way of working. And onto the non-digital work that people were exploring. At the time when we did the call out for digital content and we were completely overwhelmed, we did a call out for people who were doing non-digital working, and there was an overwhelming sense of total silence as people were really, really finding it challenging to reach out. I mean, we did our own local project, which is another conversation entirely, but even getting printers who were open and available for work, trying to grapple with the Royal Mail when all the post had stopped. So those sorts of really challenging logistical issues in amongst how do we get content that is sensitive and appropriate for older people when we can't work in partnership with them to curate that in a meaningful way. So there were all sorts of different issues. So that was May, and just very quickly about we moved into October, where we then used that as another time of framing. So we then did another call out for information about reflections on how things have changed since the summer, and we're still exploring that now. But what we did do as a kind of practical help as the Age of Creativity Network was we did a series of events called Creative Crunch, where they were 1 hour lunchtime sessions purely dedicated to networking. What we did was keep it light touch, no presentations. It was just an exploration of how we can work together on different themes. So we looked at postal projects, we looked at phone projects, we looked at blended approaches, that sort of sweet spot between the digital and the non-digital and how people can connect in that space. We looked at people living with dementia and their carers. We looked at evaluating in lockdown and how to evaluate within crisis. Again, no answers, but lots and lots of rich material that we can share across the network. So looking forward, we are very much trying to take forward the information that we've had from the network over the last few months and build that into something for the future. So one area that we're exploring is how we can use the Age of Creativity Festival website that we normally have just for May. How can we adapt and develop that into something that could be an all year round resource for older people, particularly those people within that space who might not have the confidence to just join in with the National Theatre or take part in something locally without that extra help. And try and connect that with local age UKs and other organisations who are providing that additional support with, say, digital training or championing, that kind of stuff. So we're exploring that for the future. And what I'm also doing is I'm calling it a year out, but it's not quite a year out. It's a year to fully explore how the Age of Creativity Network, this grouping of an eclectic mix of professionals from all different backgrounds, can better be supported to help one another and to support more older people to connect with creativity and culture. So I don't have any answers with that, but if you're not already part of that network, please connect with us. We will be going along that journey with you and updating you with how I'm developing this work and building focus groups and consultations throughout this next 12 months. But the idea is that from the COVID crisis, we use this as a launch pad to make longer term supportive help for this group of people that we excel in so many ways, but we also have quite a fragile sector that we need to build, and I'm hoping to build on that with everyone here and of course Virginia Chandy at CARDA. So thanks for having me. I hope I haven't overrun too much.
No, you're bang on, Farrell. That was great. There's just been a couple of quick clarifications popping in the text box. Lots of interest in lots of the things you've been talking about. Someone was just wondering whether the Creative Crunch is still happening. Is that something that's ongoing, and how can they kind of access that, or what are the plans around it?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is that they will be coming back. It was a pilot, a new way of kind of connecting people remotely. We didn't know if it was going to work. It worked fantastically well. We kind of got an 80% thumbs up rate from them. So we're just refining, but we'll bring them back in February, we hope. And then again, as part of the festival next year in May in some kind of format.
Okay, that's great. So presumably people would like to be part of that. The best way is to make sure they're part of your network.
Absolutely. We'll send all the information that way. Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. That's great. That's good. And another question there, the creative aging snapshot that you did, that you mentioned towards the start, are the results of that published somewhere? Someone was asking.
Again, the short answer is no. A lot of it was done quite quick and dirty, and I didn't quite know how I was going to evaluate it or pull it together. So I had information from calls, Facebook, tweets, texts, all sorts. So it's really about trying to put that into something that's manageable for me to write and for other people to read. So that will be part of my next year of development, will be putting something together and then using that to reflect back and ask more questions. So yeah, that's the longer answer.
Fantastic. No, that's really helpful. I completely get the sort of challenge of wanting to just kind of move in real time really quickly, but
Yeah.
also the kind of trying to get a balance with what do we kind of, actually get out as written documents and legacy of all of that. But thank you very much, Farrell. I'm sure we'll come back to you during the discussion a bit later on, but that was really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our final case study now, and we're really pleased that Hayley Green from Writing East Midlands is able to come along and share with us some of the experiences that they've had during lockdown from Writing East Midlands. Hayley, are you there?
Imogen, sorry, I am here. It's come back. I just sent you an email to say I've completely cut out, but it's come back.
Oh, that's fantastic. Good. Thank goodness. Are you all right as well, Abby? Was that about that? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. We're all good. Fingers crossed. I'll let you get on, Hayley. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I am going to keep my video off because my internet has cut out at least 5 times during this. So I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as possible. So sorry if I'm rabbiting on, but I'm really conscious of it cutting out. So my name's Hayley Green. I'm from Writing East Midlands, who are the writer development agency for the East Midlands region. And as part of Celebrating Age, we've been delivering the Elder Tree project, which is working with older people above the age of 55. So up until lockdown, we did most of our residences in care homes and hospital settings. And we sort of said we were going to do half of our residences in those settings and half of our residences in community settings. So thankfully, we had finished all of our care home settings before lockdown happened. But obviously, we needed a way to still continue the project and still reach out to the communities that we wanted to. So we came up with Zoom with a Brew, which was a few stages in making. So we were working closely with First Art, and we had 2 writers for the project, Andy Barrett and Lucy Grace. And what we really wanted to do was connect with the most isolated communities. So we were working in North Nottinghamshire, and we had, writers who were in really rural settings that, well, nobody could get out, but these were the most isolated people that had nothing kind of going to them. So we worked with First Art, and they were delivering a festival called Go the Distance, where they were sending out packages to people's homes via post. And what we decided to do was create a package that went out to people as part of these toolkits, would you say, called Is There Anybody Out There? So I've put the flyer up there. As you can see, we sent a flyer around to people's homes, and we asked them to text a number to say, I am ready. And the plan was to send out writing prompts to people via phone, via text. And the reason we did that, this was in April, and the reason that they did that was because they saw a lot of stuff. As we all know, everything kind of went, everything's on Zoom, everybody get online. And we felt like it was a little bit overwhelming. So they wanted to try something a little bit different. So they came up with this idea that wasn't purely digital. We had 0 response. It absolutely did not work at all. They tried this for a few months, and they kind of waited and hoping for that phone to go off, somebody to get involved, and nobody did. And if you think about it, if you got this flyer through the post and you were told to text a random number, would you do it? I don't know that I would. So instead, they decided that they would go traditional and they would use Zoom, and they created Writing Zoom with a Brew. So it was 6 creative writing sessions that were online, and they covered lots of different things. They did poetry, they did monologues, and they had 2 sessions a week all together. And they also continued. They did use the texting idea, and they text prompts in between sessions, and they emailed writing to each other and got feedback from the writers. So they created this group together. And then they did get a really good response for that. We had 15 older people engaged in that. And then our other thing is that we usually do a sharing, a performance as part of the elder tree. So the pattern is that we will do about 10 writing workshops, and then we'll do a sharing, and we will create something at the end of a project to share. It could be posters, it could be a book, or it could just be a performance. For this, however, they decided that they were going to keep with the online theme, and they created a website. So I will put the link to the website in the chat if I can now. And the website includes everything, there we go, everything that they did, the whole idea. It even includes all the prompts that they sent out, and you can see the writer's response and the participants' responses to them, which is really good. We did have an online sharing, which I was lucky to be a part of it. I'm actually only covering maternity and actually only started for Writing East Midlands in September, so I came in at the very end of the project. But to see what they've come up with was absolutely fantastic for me. And I spoke to the participants, and what we found was that because they were so rural, a lot of them were saying that this going online and this Zoom thing has been absolutely transformational for them, because they can't usually get involved in projects because they are so isolated, and a lot of them can't really get out of the house much. You know, they have disabilities that keep them inside. So the fact that everybody actually went online and that we actually put these creative projects online meant that they could get involved and be a part of something, which we thought was really special. And we found different ways of really creating something different. As you can see, there's on the screen, on the slide, there are some videos on there. So the participants created monologues, and then we asked professional poets, professional actors to record them. And there's a series of monologues on there. So, you know, we really created a legacy for people to continue to see the work that was delivered. So I've already said this, but we did find that the people that were involved were really thankful for the project, and we were kind of fearful that, you know, people would find Zoom very difficult, and they did. There's no way of getting around it. A lot of people find technology really difficult to contend with, and you will get people slipping out. I've slipped out of this meeting 5 times today. We can't get around that. So what we did was our shadow writer worked as a digital coordinator, and we also deliver a lot of online courses as part of our offer. And we have a digital coordinator in every single project that we do. And they will be on hand to answer any phone calls if anybody's struggling, any emails that come through. They will man the chat, and they will take care of any technical issues so that the creativity can continue and the person leading the creative bit can continue to deliver that. So we found that has worked really well. We know we're never going to get around it, but that is one way of keeping it as streamlined as possible, we've found. So that's been really helpful. And we found that all participants, they needed to engage with people, even if it was online. Like I said, we got no engagement with text a number and we'll send you a writing prompt. It just didn't work. So people still want to connect with people. They want to know that somebody is on the other end, and they like to see people's faces, which is why I think the Zoom and the online workshops worked really well. So keeping it simple is key. I know it was said earlier on in the webinar as well. I think Hannah said, keep it simple. Definitely keep it simple. You know, we were like, let's do something different. Let's do something creative. And in the end, people just wanted to see other people's faces and talk and write. And so that is what we did and we'll continue to do. They want to connect with real people. And that thing about connecting with people in the most rural areas, which we've always struggled to do as an organisation, and I think many arts organisations struggle with contacting and getting in touch with, you know, those hard to reach areas. This has allowed us to learn how to contact them and how to get them involved if they can't physically be involved. So I think that's definitely something that we'll take forward and add sort of a digital element into all of our projects moving forward to make sure that we can reach everybody. I got through it without it cutting out. Sorry, I really rolled through it really quickly. But
that's fine. You've got to strike while the iron's hot, haven't you, Hayley? Yeah, we couldn't have a webinar in which we're all talking about using tech without various people dropping out and cutting out and having problems and so on and so forth. We've had some live demonstrations of kind of issues around Wi-Fi and so on and so forth. But that was really, really brilliant. And I'm sure others will join me in thanking you particularly for sort of, I suppose, highlighting where, you know, things were tried that just didn't work out as planned. I mean, I think, you know, just the sheer amount of experimentation and having to completely adapt the offer during this period has really come out from everybody's presentations and all the examples that you're sharing in the text box. And, you know, the reality is that when you experiment, sometimes things just don't go as planned and you've got to kind of just roll back and go, actually, yeah, that was a nice idea from where we were sitting, but it just didn't bite in the way that we'd hoped. So thank you very much for sharing that journey with you. And I think also the point around your digital coordinator was really interesting. I know there's been quite a bit of talk in the chat box about how you know, some projects have actively gone out of their way to kind of try and skill people up around access to Zoom and so on and so forth, and how others are kind of trying to sort of share practical tips with each other around, you know, how they can support people to better access online platforms. So, you know, really interesting to hear that you recognise the need to really kind of engage somebody who just kind of almost sort of gives a dedicated service around that. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
There has been a huge amount of activity in the chat box. I've been struggling to read it all while listening and kind of commenting and trying to kind of draw things out. I guess just as a sort of general point, I know Sarah Harrison at the Arts Council England has been urging anybody who isn't a Celebrating Age project to email her. She put her email in the Dropbox there with any examples that fall outside of Arts Council England's funded projects. So it kind of makes me think that there's perhaps a need for us to kind of suck everything out of the chat box at some point and make that available to people. I'm just wondering, Anna, is that something that, you know, are we going to be able to kind of pull some of these links and practical examples out of that and share it? Because there's such a rich amount of material coming out.
Yeah, definitely. What we'll do after the session is we will copy everything that's in the chat box and send that out along with the recording and the slides as well, because I was thinking the same, there's so many good links that I know we've not all got time to sort of dive into at the moment, but yeah, that'll all be made available afterwards.
I think that'll be a really good resource and take some of the pressure off me. I'd like to give a shout out to everybody, but we'll just see how we go. There's a couple of kind of quite practical questions which are quite targeted, which I thought I'd come to first. Certainly there was a question, forgive me, I'm struggling to match everybody's names up, but there was a question around ideas for, oh, have I frozen? Oh gosh.
I think you should be fine, Imogen.
Oh, good. I said there was suddenly a blip there at my end as well. Oh no, you've taken me off the slides, that's it, good. There was a question around ideas for just really practical activities that can be thrown into a Zoom session. There was somebody in the chat was saying that they're running a Zoom-based coffee morning, which interestingly was intergenerational, and there's been quite a lot of reflection around sort of whether there's much intergenerational practice going on through this period. And a call out really for just some kind of really simple practical ideas of things that might be thrown into that kind of setting, really, just to get people's kind of creativity going. I'm kind of partly looking at you, Hannah, but you don't know that because there's a lot of faces on my screen. But anyone else who's, you know, from the panel who's got a kind of, you know, Farrell, there might be things you've come across, there might be things, Hayley, from your work. Just wondered if we can just share some really practical little simple ideas that people can be throwing into that kind of setting. Hannah, you're nodding. I'll take that as a you're going to accept that question. Yeah. Brilliant.
Absolutely. So we made a range of YouTube tutorials, and one
Hannah, it's a bit glitchy again. Do you want to maybe shut your video and just see if it helps?
Yeah. Is that better?
Yes.
Great. Okay. And yeah, we've made some resources and YouTube guides. We've been using a lot with older people. They are, you know, really adaptable and suitable for family and young people. So, I post you to our website, www.artspace.com. Org, and there's a section there with our resources.
Okay, I'm afraid we're having real problems with your Wi-Fi connection, Hannah, but we did hear that you've got a link there, so perhaps you might just pop that into the chat box for people, and people can go to that to get some really quick hit practical ideas. Any other ideas from any of the other panellists around kind of quick hit stuff, Farrell?
I'm not going to say that I know any that I can talk about right now, but what I was going to say is that if you guys do have anything that you want to share with us, that you're thinking, I know something, then please do share it with us, because the website is the best way for us to share it across the network of lots of professionals who are here today, but also who aren't here today and might be grappling with the exact same issues. We do have a lot of content on the website that is links to various different digital activities and non-digital downloads, that kind of stuff. But I don't know if there are any really specific kind of icebreakers or starters that are great for Zoom chats. I know that there was someone in the chat who was asking particularly about how that sort of 3 or 5 step plan of getting people onto Zoom if they've never been on before. We've definitely got something on that, but I think it's just we're trying to collate stuff. So if anyone's got anything, then please share it, and I will share it with everyone as well. Yeah, I haven't got anything that pops up to mind that works brilliantly well myself.
Okay.
But if you have, please let me know and I'll share it.
That's fine. And also there's been a lot of questions just about kind of this point around both supporting people to get onto tech that they're not previously familiar with, and also questions around investing in upgrading tech, particularly around kind of care home settings, and whether there's been any kind of learning in relation to that, any kind of pieces to share. Just wondering whether any of the panellists would like to come in and share some of those further reflections.
Have the other panel members today tech problems?
Yeah, you go for it, Farrell. Sorry, the noise. There's a lot of interference.
So I was going to say I don't know about the tech in care homes. The vast majority of work that I've been doing recently is that feedback.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's really bad feedback.
I'll try and carry on. So I haven't really been looking at tech upgrades. What I've been looking at is that sweet spot between the digital and the non-digital. So that blended approach of trying to connect people to creativity in whatever way they can manage now. I think lots of feedback.
Has everybody got their microphones muted? Oh. That seems a lot better now all of a sudden.
I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in.
Do you just want to repeat what you said, Farrell, now? I think we've lost the interference, which is great. Do you want to just go again? Thanks for your patience, everybody.
So I was going to say that I haven't really experienced the upgrading, which I would absolutely, again, love to know about. The area that I've spent a lot of my time exploring is that sweet spot between the digital and the non-digital, that blended approach. What we've found at a local level is that older people not always find it a challenge to get online, but those who do, trying to come from a more person-centred approach where rather than we deliver it in this way, you engage in this way, it's more about putting it onto multi-platforms. So we've been delivering the same content, but by post, by text, by email, by Zoom, by call, and trying to be as open and accessible as possible. So some examples of how that's worked is people have only been able to engage in a project at the beginning by post, then they've built the confidence to then phone in, and then built the confidence to say, actually, can you help me to get onto Zoom? And that's been quite a high proportion of people who've joined our blended approach project. So I would say from our point of view, that's been more of the focus, is trying to get those people that sort of most high needs, trying to work that way of a kind of a progression along the communication platforms. But I'd be massively interested. I saw somebody putting on about augmentation reality or something, which sounds awesome. If anyone can tell me any more about that, it sounds incredible. Feedback again, but yes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That was much clearer, I think, and hope for everybody. Apologies that there's been some issues with the sound. Okay, great. Thanks for that. Did anyone else from the panel want to come in on that question, or shall I move on?
I think just to agree really with Farrell, although we've been doing a lot of stuff online and a lot of our courses have gone online. With writing, it's pretty easy to do online. You can deliver a writing prompt and people can write. But what we've been finding is that it's been better for us to email out or text out or send out in any way a writing prompt, and for people to do the activities in between sessions, and then when they're in the session they come together and talk about it. That way everybody can join in. If they can't get onto the session for whatever reason, it doesn't particularly affect the activities, because they can still do them, and there's more time for that connection, because like I said, that's what the feedback that we're getting is, that especially during lockdown, people they just want to talk and to talk about their ideas rather than actually do the activities. They're preferring to do those in between. So that blended approach, I think that you're talking about, Farrell, is working really well, and will continue to do so.
Thanks. And Hayley, I think sorry, yeah, Lorna.
It's Hannah again. Sorry, my connection's a little bit better now, I think. Just to say the thing we found in care homes, rather than doing the activity within the Zoom session, we use the Zoom session more to tell people about the activity by them and give them some ideas and answer any questions, and to give them the opportunity to go away and do that in their own time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense around that use of Zoom. Definitely, I think from our experience today, the idea of trying to do a shared collective creative activity is quite challenging at times, isn't it, online? So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just wondering as well, there's been obviously quite a lot of interest in the chat box on the idea of your creative crunch, and it's kind of raised for me some questions around kind of staff well-being, which, as I mentioned at the very start, came out very clearly as a concern within David's report from the Bearing Foundation. And I'm just wondering I just wanted to sort of find out from the panel really how, what you'd learned and what you'd found worked, and what you sort of found some of the challenges and how you'd overcome them really were around connecting with each other as a team really during this difficult period. Because, let's not forget that actually through most of this time, a lot of you have been, in isolation, certainly from your colleagues and other people that you'd normally work alongside. And I'm just interested in your reflections around how that side of things have gone. If you'd like to start, who's got a decent signal, hopefully. Can't catch anyone's eyes. I don't want to land people in it.
Imogen, it's Lorna. Hi.
Great.
I just wanted to reflect one thing that we picked up across the programmes, and again, this is very early on in terms of lockdown. It's something that I think is relevant in terms of sort of staff well-being, and that what was going on, because it affected all of us, that this wasn't a one-way street. So we particularly came across, it's only one example, but I don't think it was necessarily the only example, it was just the one we came across, of older participant ringing the project to say to staff at the project, how are you? And I think that was really, the project member of staff that I spoke to really touched. Partly, not just a personal level of how nice to have someone bother to say, how are you?
Imogen, I'm just going to load up a holding slide.
Yes. Let's do it. See if that helps. Thanks, Abby. I was wondering whether you might step in and give us some advice.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's causing all of the feedback because most of the time everyone is everyone I can mute is muted. Right, so just load it up. It might be, this might help. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed. Should we go ahead then? Yeah, Lorna, sorry. Do you want to just...
No, that's fine. I'm sorry. I'm kind of pausing in between because I can hear the echo. So I'll just try and make it really swift. So the important part of it was that this project had created a team with their older participants, and that this older participant felt she was part of the team. And as part of the team, adult to adult, she rang up the project member of who she, sort of had consistent contact with over the course of being involved. And I think that was a really interesting side to this being something that affected everybody. So, and as I say, I think the project member particularly was very touched by that, but also really, really pleased to know that they'd created that sense of being a team, this group of people that they'd been working with. And I just wanted to push kind of that back in as well in terms of staff well-being, but that input back from people who are your participants to say, are you okay and how are you doing is a really important element, I think, of this kind of project work, where you've got an ability to work with people over a period of time and build up that kind of rapport and relationship. And I'll stop at that point.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Lorna. A really important point, I think, as well, not only about staff wellbeing, but also about the kind of the power balance shifting during this whole period. And actually, there've been lots of examples of people older people taking initiative through this whole period, not just kind of being passive recipients of kind of online materials, but actually, as you rightly say, Lorna, kind of supporting staff and creating their own content, organising their own groups. So really, really keen to hear further examples. I'm wondering if other panel members, should we see if Hayley's got decent reception, wants to come in on that point about kind of staff well-being, and whether you've got any reflections from your project on that?
Actually, I don't, because I'm very new. I actually wasn't around and don't know much about the well-being, so I don't have any I'm really sorry.
That's okay. Sorry,
it's so new, so
it's so hard to catch people's eyes and know whether or not they've got something they want to add. Hannah, if you've got decent connection, are you able to comment on that?
I'll try if you can hear me. Hopefully,
we can. It's brilliant, clear. Go for it.
We just try to communicate as much as possible, and we've all found, and I'm sure everyone can kind of identify with this in a way, that we've been sort of affected by this in so many different ways. And I think one of the things I was really worried about in particular was the fact that we've been working with our Mindscape participants who live in the community for a number of years now, and staff are really attached to, we're all very attached. We're like a family, really. So I think just having those weekly conversations with them on the phone, it was reassuring to know that everybody was doing okay. And we would try and just chat to each other on Zoom as frequently as we could, just keep those channels of communication open, and just keep checking in on each other to make sure that we were all doing all right.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful. Thank you. And on Farrell, obviously you mentioned quite a bit about staff support and the importance of that and your creative function. I'm just wondering whether you've got any further kind of reflections on that really important topic, and what people are doing and can do to kind of support each other. Really, what's working.
Yeah, so as part of the Creative Ageing Snapshot, which we did in May and in October, it's quite telling really. So in May, it very much felt as though there were sort of three camps of people and their well-being across the sector. So the first camp was the people who just did everything online and were trying to go at the same pace that they were going at normally, but entirely online, and I guess reaching burnout pretty quick. And I was quite worried at that point for some of my colleagues who just tried to keep everything as business as usual and just sort of going full pelt. And I think we saw a bit of burnout in the summer from those individuals, probably a bit myself as well. Another camp was people who were literally just sitting and waiting and thinking this is all going to just flow over. All I need to do is wait a month or two and I can go back to how it was before. And I guess around the summertime, it was those people who were quite shocked that things weren't going back to normal and suddenly dawning that they might have to do things differently. And I guess the contingent that I tried to put myself in and tried to encourage as much with other colleagues was to try and be in that third place, whatever that is, where just not putting too much pressure on yourself, trying to take even more self-care than normal, creating networks of people that you just like and get on well with, who you don't have to talk about your projects. It doesn't have to be a business meeting. It can just be a check-in, a regular check-in. And for myself and for other colleagues who are still going and still not melting down quite, having those connections is massively important. And that was part of the reason why these creative crunch sessions were created, was a chance for those freelancers who don't naturally have those colleagues in the sector that they can just say, do you fancy a Zoom just because, rather than I need to talk to you about X, Y and Z. And the other reflection, I guess, from now in the October snapshot that we did was that those professionals who are working with the most vulnerable older people are themselves the most vulnerable right now. And I get that feeling, that sense of despair and anger and running out of energy to kind of try and make do with this difficult situation, that this sort of sense of responsibility for getting back out there and helping people who they know would benefit so much from the work that they do, that they can't do it, and that acknowledgement that it is for quite a long time to come. And that's where I think these next set of support sessions will come in February. We'll try, I hope, to explore some of that with people and pick some of that difficult ground that we are ourselves in need of support, as well as trying to support other people. So I've got no answers, but I guess that networking, support, connecting to each other is really important, and not putting too much pressure on yourself to try and solve COVID, because it can't be solved. So yeah, those are my reflections.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I guess just that spirit as well of kind of recognising that when you experiment, sometimes things don't always take, do they? And, you know, not kind of beating ourselves too much up about that, but kind of connecting with others and learning and thinking, just coming up with different ways of trying things. I think that's been a really clear message from the conversations today. There's been some questions, well, there was a question. Again, I'm sorry, because there's such a lot of material going through the chat box. It's quite hard to pluck out the questions and then to go back and find them again. So I'm sort of making notes. So forgive me if I bring your question in and don't mention your name. But there was a question around the challenge of sort of engaging people that aren't already known to a project. And I think that's a real kind of challenge moving forwards, isn't it? As Lorna said at the outset, there was this kind of huge amount of energy at the start from projects to try and just get in touch with people that we're already working with and make sure they're okay, work out the best way of continuing to engage them. But of course, over time, it becomes more challenging to kind of start new projects and to kind of launch new stuff and to reach out to new groups. And I mean, we've touched a little bit on some of the kind of things that have worked or haven't worked in terms of marketing, but I think it would be interesting just to hear from panelists about, you know, that balance between engaging people they already knew and reaching out to kind of reach new people, and what some of the kind of tips and learning have been around that. Where should we start? Hannah, have you got a signal? Have you got something to say, or does somebody just want to jump in who's ready with an answer maybe? Yeah, do you want to come in? Is that great?
Yeah, of course. I think for us, Artspace were fairly, we were Luddites really in terms of social media before all of this, and it was really forced us to sort of up our game and start advertising more on social media. And I mentioned a little bit earlier in my presentation that we've sort of been engaging new audiences. And out of the 150 odd people that we enrolled, 52 of those people were new to our organisation, which absolutely stunned us. And we realised that, there's a whole audience of people that actually this way of engaging really suits. They weren't able to come along to a course at our art centre, but this really did suit them. So social media was one way, and MailChimp and those kind of things, but also networking through our partners. And I think, what Farrell said earlier about making those sort of links and chatting to people that, they might be your colleagues at your organisation, but they might also be from external partners organisations who can help you to signpost people to your provision. And I don't know whether this is a similar situation in other areas of the country, but Forest of Dean has a social prescribing set up through the district council, and they've actually been referring people to our programmes. So similarly as well, the Alzheimer's Society are a fantastic means of referring people onto our programmes. So maybe reaching out to similar partner organisations and just asking if they can make their service users aware of what we're doing.
That's really, really helpful, Hannah. Thank you very much. And anyone want to come in, Lorna or Hayley? Or
Yeah, it's along the same lines as Hannah, really. Working with partners has been really essential for us. And we've found that on discussing with other colleagues, we've still got a few projects that we need to deliver, and we need to find different groups. There are groups out there that do very well on social media that already meet. There are groups when lockdown is lifted again. We were about to start another physical project, and that came about because we spoke to our partners, Transported, and they thought of another group that they could talk to. It is about networking. People, especially people in the arts, have so many different hats on, as we know we all do. So they know so many different groups that you can contact. So I think they're a useful resource that we shouldn't overlook. So keep talking to partners and different people.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful advice. And obviously, Lorna and Farrell, I realise you're sort of in a sense once in an Uber position, but if you've got any examples of, rather than directly doing this yourself firsthand, but if you've got any examples that either of you can think of that you want to throw in around sort of engaging new audiences, then do feel free. If not, then that's fine.
I think, I'm just going to talk from my own perspective because, I kind of am interested in quite a lot of art stuff personally, as well as this professional role with the evaluation. And one of the things that I've found is that I've come across an awful lot of new ways of sharing a whole range of creative performances and participatory things with organisations I didn't particularly know about. I've shared them with other people, and that information has come to me through a whole range of different routes. So sometimes it's another organisation that I happen to be on their email list, and they've included something about, this is going on this week, or you might be interested in this. So I have connections in with writing things. I have some connections in with theatre. I have some connections in with, kind of a whole range of other activities. And so that what I'm really conscious of is that there's been a real sharing. There's been a massive amount of organisations sharing other organisations' things. So arts organisations sharing other arts organisations, but non-arts also sharing to their constituency, if you like, to say, you might be interested in this. This is really interesting. I've just had a very nice exchange in the chat with New Perspectives because they've been sending a play out through 6 postcards over a period of time. And I bought that for a friend of mine who's been shielding and who happens to live in South Wales. And I'm on the south coast of England, and New Perspectives are in Nottinghamshire. So we're kind of really all over the place, as it were, but it doesn't matter. And also, I very recently watched a show that was kind of partly recorded and partly animated for a recording. And that drew in, I'd never been into that theatre, but that drew in people from worldwide. So there's a kind of, the reaching of audiences is really interesting. You can reach lots of different people, but that massive sharing of information about what's around and how that's happening through non-obvious routes is, I think, really, really interesting and is opening up lots of arts access to lots of people. I have a friend who both of her sons have Duchenne's, and so for them, they both use electric wheelchairs. For them, getting anywhere is an absolute nightmare for a whole host of logistical reasons. But they've been able to access masses of stuff because it's come through the post, it's come online, it's come in other ways, and they've been able to take part in things too. And I think it's not just the being an audience, it's the participating as well that's really important. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in. As a little bit of perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lorna. Farrell, do you want to add anything on that point?
Yeah, I suppose I was going to just echo what everyone else is saying in terms of when you change your delivery and you change your way of communicating with people, other people come out of the woodwork, and there have been quite a lot of unexpected outcomes that happened with our delivery. So there's some more feedback. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's not too bad.
So in terms of our delivery at a local level in Oxfordshire, we've actually increased the amount of work that we've done with other services that are non-arts, which has been brilliant. It's been really challenging to try and get those kind of connections before. But we recognise that by working with carer services or dementia services that we're going to reach more people. And the response that we've had from those services locally is that by rejigging the way that we deliver our content, they've connected with people that they've struggled to in the past. So just with the carer services, increasing the amount of men that they've connected with. And actually, I do think that the way we've developed our delivery in this sort of blended multi-platform way has meant those people with really complex lives who wouldn't necessarily be able to go into a community centre at the same time every week to be part of something are finding a huge value, and they don't want it to go back to how it was before. So I think the challenge will come when we go back to some kind of normality in the future about those sorts of decisions and how do we deliver things, because I think there's going to be a huge volume of people who are connecting with things for the first time that we don't want to lose, but then how do we reconnect with the people in the way that they're more accustomed to? So I think that's the challenge that we're anticipating for some point. But I would say that with the change of delivery, we haven't found it as challenging to connect with new people as we thought we would. In fact, it's been the opposite. We've connected with different types of people. So I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And yes, I think in the words of the Bearing Foundation report, the future is blended, isn't it? I mean, there's as you rightly said earlier, Farrell, there's a whole period of kind of headless chicken. How do we adapt? What can we throw out there? What do we kind of do? And sort of this huge wave of creativity. I mean, I've just been blown away by the amount of material coming in through the chat box of examples that people are involved in and ways in which people are adapting. But there's this huge and I think broadly really hopeful question around, how do we retain the best bits of that and go back as I think Hannah said earlier, to what a lot of projects, know and do best, which is, face-to-face work with people, and how do we kind of, carve out the right balance of those two things in the future is going to be really exciting. So I think I'm going to bring the questions to a close there. As I say, there's been lots of people answering each other's questions in the chat box as we've gone through. So I've just been kind of, I'll quickly answer that, and someone else has jumped in. So thank you for everybody for kind of making that work. It feels like it's a really big event today in terms of numbers. And actually, what we miss out by not being in the same room, apart from not being able to consistently hear each other all the time, is that kind of opportunity to kind of do a bit of networking over tea and coffee. But I think we've done our very best at doing I've seen a lot of connections happening in that box. So that's been brilliant, and I hope some of those conversations can carry on beyond the event. Thanks to Fact sharing those details with us afterwards. So I'm going to turn now to Virginia Tandy, who is the Director of the Creative Ageing Development Agency. And I will obviously allow Virginia to introduce herself and her work, but I know that she's going to give us a short update on some of the additional support that's available for creative ageing practice from CADA. Are you there, Virginia?
I am. Can you hear me?
Brilliant. We can. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for, letting me sit in on this webinar and hear all the amazing work that people have been doing over the last 6 months and further back in terms of celebrating age. But what I wanted to do was just take the opportunity to just say a few quick words about the Creative Ageing Development Agency, which might be something you're not that familiar with. So a quick bit of history. It's seed funded by the Bearing Foundation, who we've talked about quite a bit today. And it's the legacy of their 10-year investment programme, which many of you have benefited from. The grant to create this initiative, which is working across England, was secured by a consortium from Greater Manchester, which came together, which was the combined authority, the Centre for Collaborative Research into Ageing at the University, and Manchester Museum, part of the Manchester Museum's partnership. And they proposed creating, as a way of taking forward Bearing's work as they moved into mental health issues, they proposed creating a sector support organisation stroke development agency. So it's a unique national initiative in relation to creative ageing because of those links with local authorities, academia and cultural institutions. Because I'm sure you're aware that the other creative ageing organisations, such as Age of Creativity, who we're working closely with in terms of what we're going to do in the future, are all hosted by Age UK, so they have a slightly different perspective. I was appointed in March and previously worked in national and regional roles in cultural policy and strategy and have run a couple of large city centre venues. I work part-time, so progress is slower than I would like, and I've done about the equivalent of 4 months at a time of great change and disruption, as well as, we've heard today, innovation. I held 7 consultation meetings nationally in July over Zoom, and some of you or your colleagues did attend these. And since then, I've been crafting aims and objectives, setting up structures, identifying potential partners and priorities, and connecting with academic research, the Ageing Better network of communities, the age-friendly communities, as well as arts and heritage organisations and practitioners. My role and the organisation's kind of focus will be concerned with strategy support and research. We won't be involved in direct delivery, and we will be announcing our way forward in the new year. But just to give you some sort of indications of our areas of concern, as an older person myself, one of my interests is around tackling ageism and amplifying the voice of older people in conversations about creative ageing, ensuring that we are citizens of equal value. And I don't know how many of you have seen today's report on language around ageing that's just been published by the Centre for Ageing Better, but it demonstrates there is still a huge way to go, and a lot of the language has been exacerbated by COVID over the last 6 months. Secondly, I'm interested in inclusion and diversity, and these were things in a way that were bequeathed to me by the Bearing Foundation. The lack of visibility of creative ageing work in minority communities is a concern. We know it's there. We need to find ways of connecting with it and recognising it. Thirdly, we've talked a lot about digital, and we need to find a way of helping support the debates around the digital divide as we move forward, and that becomes such a big part of what we do every day rather than during an emergency. And finally, and this is something that Farrell and I were only talking about last week or the week before, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of baseline data around creative ageing. Well, all the speakers obviously understand the people that they work with directly. I'm still looking for an overview which would help make a better case. I want to understand how we can use existing data and research better that's maybe not done in the arts sector but is relevant to it, and also understand what's already in place, what we already know, and where investment is made, but importantly, where the gaps are. So maybe that gives you some idea of the kinds of things that I'll be looking at trying to progress over the next 3 years and hopefully longer. And I think that's all I need to say. Do get in touch with me. We haven't got a website yet. We will have one soon. The Twitter handle is CADA, capital CADA _England. Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to say a few words.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, terrible echo back again. Oh, that's a little bit better. Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much for that, Virginia. Really important to end us on some of those reflections around ageism and around equality and diversity, and of course also around evidence and an evidence-based approach and how we use evidence to influence other funders and sustainable funding. I know certainly one of the key messages that came out of the Bearing Foundation report was that actually as audience sizes dwindle and revenue from those sources becomes even more difficult to achieve, how do we sort of lean more heavily into health and social care funding than perhaps we have in the past, when at a time when they're also stretched, and we absolutely need good evidence in order to do that. And I just noticed, I was just going to say if you could share your email address, but you've just done it in the chat box, so thank you very much. So do get in touch with Virginia if you want to kind of add anything into that discussion or link her to your own work or research or practice. Fantastic. So I think we're coming to the last few moments, and it's really just up to me now to thank everybody for, well, certainly to thank all the participants for coming along and for sticking with us. I know we've had a few choppy waters in terms of echoes and tech and Wi-Fi and so on and so forth. So really, really appreciate your kind of dedication in sticking with us through that. As I know, we're all kind of learning as we go, aren't we, about the best ways to manage these kinds of things and to kind of make this work. But I feel that today's been a really powerful opportunity. There's obviously an enormous amount of energy and activity going on in this area, both within the Celebrating Age programme, but also out with it, and a real kind of hunger and a desire to kind of network and connect with each other and share ideas. So hopefully today's given a really good kind of boost to that kind of networking, and people can pursue some of the ideas and opportunities and materials that we've been able to share today. And I just want to take the opportunity, of course, to thank our brilliant speakers. Thanks to my colleague Lorna. Thank you very much for summarising and reflecting on the learning from Celebrating Age. Thanks so much for Hannah Elton-Wall, for sharing some of the learning and activities that have been going on at Artspace Cinderford. Thanks to Farrell Downen from Age UK Oxfordshire and the Age of Creativity. Been really helpful to kind of have your kind of overview that you've gleaned from your work, snapshotting and linking people together and pulling together resources over these months. And really great, Hayley, that you were able to join us from Writing East Midlands. I know you've not been in post very long, but there's obviously been some really interesting work going on at Writing East Midlands. It was really interesting to hear some of the journey you've been through there. Thanks obviously to Virginia. And then Thanks also to Abby from the AMA for holding us together and for kind of providing the tech platform for us. Thanks obviously to ACE for funding us all, and thanks to Family Arts Campaign for continuing to hold these really crucial webinars during this period to try and bring us all a bit closer together and have a chance to really share and reflect on the learning, the enormous learning that's come out of this hugely challenging, but in many ways, you know, also opportunity-giving period that we're living through at the moment. So thank you very much. If I haven't forgotten anything or anyone wants to jump in and remind me that I should have said anything, I think we'll bring this webinar to a close. So thank you very much for your participation. And I know there's still messages popping in. I'm trying to be part of those, read what's going on the chat box. But thank you very much. I think we'll come to a close.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Imogen. And I think you've covered all of the thank yous, but of course I also want to thank you and Family Arts Campaign and all of our wonderful speakers and the participants for what has been an incredibly interactive session, which is brilliant. And also apologies for those few tech issues that we had, which do crop up, unfortunately, on an online session sometimes. So the recording, I will try and get around to everyone tomorrow, but if it's not tomorrow, it will be Monday, and that will come with the slides and also the chat, which I will go through and get into some sense that's easy to read for you all. So you've got all of the resources that have been popping into the chat as well. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us this morning. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Bye.